incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sim. I'm the head of content here at Unlimit, and this is our Journey to Success series, and it's incredible to have you here. Could you please start us off with a little bit about yourself, what you do?
My name is Josh Gardner. I am the CEO and co-founder of Kung Fu Data in e-commerce group. Our mission is to help brands thrive in China. We do that a number of ways, but mostly we bring lifestyle, fashion, and performance brands to China and distribute them through China's online platforms.
That sounds incredible. I saw that you had moved to China. So what led you to make that move, and how's that experience been?
Oh, you're asking. See, now you're asking how far down the rabbit hole do you really want to go? Short answer is I started as an anthropologist living in China in the mid 90s. Yes, that's my background. My grandfather was one of those old school, born in the early 20th century, World War II Air Force pilot kind of guys that kind of built the world, right? Like that generation just did so much. But one of the things he did was go abroad and sell and be like the head of international for a big printing company, which eventually bought by International Paper. But up until then, he was in charge of like global business development, and he had the fortune of in the 60s, did you hear that, Kate? Starting to sell in Asia Pacific or build business there. So he ended up making tons of friends over here, especially in places like Hong Kong and Thailand and Malaysia. And most of his friends and clients were Chinese origin. So he ended up developing these long-term friendships, and it was very lucrative for him, gave him so much meaning in his life. And when I was in high school, he said, all right, enough of this Spanish stuff. That's going nowhere. Quit. When you go to college, you're going to learn Chinese. Pause. And he said, they're going to inherit the world. And I said, interesting. So I had a lot of respect for him because I grew up in a divorced house. So he was sort of my father figure, and I respected him tremendously. I actually did what he said. I quit Spanish and I switched to Chinese and did it as one of my majors. And that was kind of how I got involved with learning Chinese and wanting to go to China. But at that time, I wanted to do academics. So I was into anthropology, living and studying with people. And I ended up moving to China to live with minority groups in China. So I lived in many places. Actually, I've lived in many more places than most Chinese people have lived in China. I've lived as far as Harbin when I was at Harbin Institute of Technology. I was at Beijing Shoshida, which is teachers college. I was in Yunnan University in the Southwest. And I've also lived in Shanghai and many other places. And I've traveled everywhere. I guess after I did that, this was the late 90s. I graduated, I think, in 97. And I tried to get a job as an anthropologist. And this was during the Asian financial crisis. But more importantly, no one hires anthropologists. Let's be clear. There's no jobs for us anywhere on the planet. And you gotta eat, right? So I ended up abandoning my vision to be an anthropologist. I actually had to get a job, right? But up until then, I had hope, right? And I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a professor because I really enjoyed the field work, like living in the field and doing the research. But there was just nobody that paid, people like me. Now that's not true anymore. Like Google, Ogilvy, all the big agencies, they all have anthropologists on staff now. So it wouldn't have been so hard today to get a job, but it was really hard back then. And I really wanted to be an expat, go back to China. So I went into shipping, and then that was my first post as an expat. I was working for a shipping company based in Beijing. I was promoted to sales and then eventually general manager, realized how much I hated that job. So I had a real mean boss. And I mean, man, was he mean. Like from Hong Kong, but spent way too much time in New York, in Jamaica, where all the shipping companies were. And it just made him really cranky. It was tough. And back then in the late 90s, you couldn't do business in shipping and freight forwarding without doing things that are not kosher today. So to get shipments in, I mean, this was back in the late 90s, right? You had to grease the wheels. And I was super uncomfortable with what I had to do every day to be successful in the job. Now, we grew the business tremendously, hundreds of new clients. Of course, we're helping them get stuff into China. So, I mean, everyone wants you, right? But it wasn't for me. And I ended up quitting and thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? And that's when I launched my first business. I had no choice. I figured it was so much less stress and misery not working for someone. I figured even if I failed a few times, it wouldn't matter. And then, now we're six businesses later. This one we started 10 years ago. I can't believe that. I've lived in and out of China for since then, since the mid 90s. So I did start that business. I moved back to the US for a while. We started a family. And then I moved back to Shanghai again in 2013. So that's kind of our story. And then when I got there, people that I worked with at that one job I had are some of my best friends today. And we decided to start this company together. So here we are today, 10 years in. Everyone just assumes they have like the polished Elon Musk story, right? Let me tell you, if we met him when he was 16, sounds exactly like me. He didn't have like a huge vision of how he's going to go to outer space. I mean, it's all of us start the same. And I think as you get more successful in business, right, as an entrepreneur, and you have a few exits or a success, you end up building a bigger and bigger vision, and vice versa, right? You learn from your failures and you move on and you go to the next thing. And I think it all seems great in hindsight. We all rewrite our stories so they sound good. I just don't do that. I tell the truth.
I love that. That's probably the
Yeah.
anthropologist in you.
Yeah. So I just tell people how I ended up starting my own companies because no one hires anthropologists, period. That's it. And the jobs you get because you don't have credentials are terrible. So you may as well start a company. It's better that way. So that was kind of my thinking at the time in my early 20s, mid 20s. And things have changed obviously now. I hope that I am the boss that mine wasn't. And I treat my people really, really well as a result. Not sure that's a good thing. Oh, maybe it is.
It's always a great thing. People always feel valued and appreciated.
I'm joking. But yeah, so that's kind of my story. And starting this company was interesting. When I got there, I remember I showed up in Shanghai. I didn't know what I was going to start. I thought I was going to start a subscription software business. All my assumptions were wrong. We tried to do everything, and it was a complete flop for the first year. And I ended up having to reconcile what we could actually get money to do, like what people would pay us for. And it wasn't the things I thought when I first went over there. Because I had a brief period where I was out of China and everything changed. And then all my assumptions were wrong. So it's a place that changes so rapidly. You kind of have to really you have to be on the pulse at all times to see where it's going to be moving and not make those kind of mistakes. So I made another rookie mistake on my sixth launch. You'd think I would have gotten it right, but no, screwed it up. Then we fixed it. So that's it. And so here we are today, and we've kind of evolved in many different ways. And now obviously have a very, what you would call in my category, a reasonably successful business. So that's kind of, right now I think we have 100 people in China. I do live in Singapore now, which is sort of a byproduct of COVID, right? And having a family to raise and things like that. And, but I commute. I'm in China all next week and I'm always traveling. My clients are European and Australian brands. So I spend most of my travel there. Again, another weird thing about me, I'm the only American in the entire industry that doesn't have American clients. Seriously, it's insane. I don't know why. Maybe they just don't want to sell to me because I'm American. They want to hear a British accent. I don't know. Or Chinese. I have no idea, but I seemingly cannot work with Americans. They don't want to work with us. But I have a lot of European and Australian clients, and they're great. And they have wonderful brands, and we give them their day in court, and they do so well, right? When things are done the right way.
Absolutely. That's incredible. I think the main thing that I find really incredible and inspiring is you're so transparent about the fact that you wanted to do one thing and you ended up doing something completely different. And you are right. That is the journey for most people, that they have a vision of something they would like to achieve. Or some people, actually, to be fair, are just sort of rolling with it. And you're proof that you can still do phenomenal things. It may not pan out the way you want it to, but it ends up being incredible anyway.
If you want to be successful, you have to be progressively non-linear in how you think. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's sort of, you've already jumped, you've jumped off the cliff, and you're either going to build an airplane or you're going to crash. It's really that simple. It's that analogy. It's very accurate. And sometimes the airplane you build doesn't work. In fact, I've built many airplanes that don't work. I have to do another one before I hit the ground. So that's kind of how I see it. You have to learn to fly on the way down. And it's not easy. And I think, there's no one right way to do things. It's
Sure.
not black and white.
Yeah, but ultimately you've led up to a place where you are happy, you're thriving, which is incredible. It would be really interesting to know what a day in the life of CEO for Kung Fu Data is like.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting question. When I started, it was very different. So it's better to show a contrast. So when we started, we did not have huge staff and resources and capital. We have no outside investments. It was just my friends and I who started this and put in our own money. I would say the first few years, it was just about finding the model that was going to work, not screwing it up too much, and creating stability in operating brands in China. So stable brands, stable clients, stable operating teams for those clients, stable relationships. And I know that sounds bizarre because when you launch a business outside China, that's never an issue. It might take you forever to land a client, but after you do, they tend to be very stable. In China, this is like the ultimate goal for the first few years is to just have some kind of stable, reliable revenue and team structure and operating systems that you can kind of bank on. And so that was the focus. So I was working insane hours, as you can imagine, a startup entrepreneur, and I have a family. I had to get a car. So I had a driver when I was in Shanghai. And the first 3 years, I was commuting probably 3 hours a day, both from where I was living, but also in between meetings. I was out of the house the crack of dawn when the kids get on the bus at 7. And then I didn't get home until 1, 2 a.m. And that went on for years. And it's not good for your health. It's really not. I had terrible health when I eventually stopped that pace. But I think those first few years, that building of the reputation, keeping your head down, making sure you make everything right, and meeting as many, many people as you can possibly meet was vital to getting us off on a foot. Today, it's very different. I have a large team and they're all very competent and independent for the most part. There's high involvement because it's China. So a typical day in the life now is not like that, where it's just me against the world and my partners and a few staff. Now we have a big army, I would call it, right? That is very aligned. It's all about leadership for me every day. It's all about mentoring, leadership, and falling on the sword for my team. China's throwing curveballs at you 100% of the time. There's always something going wrong. So you're like a master firefighter. You're like, put your hat on in the morning, get in your fire truck, and you're the brigade. So I think one of the roles as a CEO is really to deal with these kind of problems in China. It's constant. It's not that easy to continuously deal with the level of stress. Like clients, like we just bought a huge amount of inventory from one of our clients, G-Star for the fall. They make one little mistake in the labeling in Chinese and we're screwed, right? There's $500,000 worth of goods that we can't sell because the labels are illegal. So this is the kind of stuff that comes up all the time in my business, and it's very stressful. So that's the stressful side. And so my job is to kind of diffuse stress among the team and make sure everyone has what they need to be successful in their jobs. And then if there's issues with clients, with the brands, then it's my job to deal with it, or with the platforms to go and have a high level negotiation discussion and resolve the issue so that my team doesn't have to get in the fire, right? So that's kind of one way to look at it. And then the other is you also have great things happening. So you have lots of business development, lots of planning, lots of marketing, lots of account management, lots of operational concerns, and you're aligning all your business units daily. You're taking care of issues and planning for the future and trying to make sure we're just a few steps ahead of what's going to happen.
Sounds like a lot of work and a lot of versatility in your day to day as well, which must be exciting as well as stressful. That bodes the question. I know that as well on your profile, you speak about how people place Chinese consumers into one basket and now and the importance of understanding them. And here you're talking about the environment and the constant change. So what advice would you like to give to entrepreneurs who are looking to understand the Chinese market and how can they themselves go out and learn more about it and stay abreast of all those very rapid changes you're referring to?
There's your usual media outlets, but to me, they are so biased and inaccurate how I get my news. Because I think if you are an entrepreneur, this is how you hack your way in, right? Um, I'm in a ton of groups of people based in China that are industry insiders, various categories, various groups, and they feed information literally in real time to us. And then my team also feeds information to me in real time. So I have like my marketing team for internal marketing is constantly scraping and figuring out and sifting through information to know what we have to deal with on a daily basis. And that those groups, if you can get involved in them as an entrepreneur or be invited in, it's that information is hot off the press and it's more accurate and it's vetted by a community of people that are actually living in China. So they're going through that experience, verifying the quality of those insights of that information. And a simple thing, if you're outside China and you can't get into those private groups, one thing you can do is find who the most important influencers are in the space that you're in. So whatever category you're in, the China-based influencers that are publishing regularly valuable content and have a great reputation, they're actually not that hard to find. And most of their information is good. It's better than what you see in the news, much better. And it's more accurate. And, their businesses, their livelihoods depend on the reputation of that content that they're publishing for impressing their audience and making the executives think that they're the right agency or partner for them in the market. So to me, that would be the best source of information. That's where we get our information. We don't look at media. Well, we'll see something come out on a Forbes or a CNN type, or maybe the Standard is doing something interesting, or Financial Times, or BBC puts out a little thing. But to me, those are sound bites, and they always have some kind of political agenda. And for us, if you're an entrepreneur in whatever your business is, a more practical and more applicable source of information is from the people and the communities on the ground. So join those people, find those groups, get involved with them, ask to be invited in, express interest, and you could do very well. Subscribe to feeds of people that have their livelihoods dependent on the Chinese market, and you'll be fed a lot of extremely valuable information. Now you'll sift through it. Some of it you don't think is true or not. I mean, obviously people are always selling stuff, but to me, it's pretty easy to see quality, right? So that would be how I would learn. And you learn by doing, right? So doing those things, that action is going to bring you much farther along in the market. If you hear any kind of used car salesman type stuff, like easy, quick, simple, fast, none of that's true in China. It's the exact opposite. So when I hear that, I think, okay, they're selling a bill. They're snake oil. Who's publishing stuff that's more real, that I can see, that's something I can use? So that would be something I would highly recommend any of your audience, is to opt into feeds and find the people that are well respected, have the best content, the quality is there. And I think any intelligent executive anywhere in the world can tell the difference between good and bad content. We all know the difference between an Instagram post with dogs eating cat food and a qualified data source. It's not that hard to see the difference. If it's someone publishing rah ha ha content about how they got a new job promotion in China, that's really not going to get you anywhere, right? You need to focus on people that are sharing information that is valuable. And there's a lot of them. It's not one. There's quite a few. And I think information is pretty easy to get, I would say. And then in terms of for your business in China, I think the number one priority right now for all of us in the market is understanding your risk in the structure of entry, because there's all sorts of stuff going on now politically and also economically, like the environment in China. Just make sure you really got something and make sure you can defend your position on it, and that you're not going to be taxed or overregulated or boxed out like a lot of people. So I think if you're in technology, it's very hard. If you're in retail, it's very easy. Consumer goods are easy to sell in China for the most part. I don't think that's a huge problem. It's when you're going to go in and create an ecosystem that the government thinks they need to regulate. That's a problem. So I think this understanding the regulatory environment and how aggressive they are in terms of policing businesses in your category of trade, that's the most important thing, I think, in technology and other similar sensitive industries. So tech, commodities, anything like this would be something that you would have to be careful. And then others, you don't have to be so careful. If you're the number one producer of organic grass-fed milk from Europe and it's totally pure and babies can drink it raw and it has no lactose in it, you can make $1 billion in China right now, right? That's something worth pursuing. So it really depends on what you're selling, I guess, and the profile of the business, because the structure of entry is very important and understanding the nuances in that. So like cross-border works for some categories, doesn't work for others. So a simple one where it really sucks is fashion. How do you make money cross-border in fashion? You can't even do it outside China. How are you going to do it in China? It's hard enough, right? But if you have to keep crossing the border in and out and your return rate is 50, 60%, and you have round trip costs and delays getting things in and out of the border, how do you make money? Very difficult, almost impossible. So you got to think through like your model, you got to think through your category, you got to think through the structure. And I think once you've done that, be honest, do you really want to do it yourself? Or are you humble enough to realize, hey, we can find someone in China that we could trust to do this for us and actually have a successful, profitable business in China. If not successful, at least it's profitable, right? Whereas a lot of people go in and they're upside down forever, or they just never can make money because they don't understand what they need to do to be at a level to make that work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It sounds like it's extremely, extremely multifaceted. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of evolution quite quickly changing in social, political, economical environments. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
factors to definitely take into consideration. So I think the advice you gave, especially connecting with other organizations and peoples, it is imperative to stay afloat and stay abreast of everything. But I mean, that poses the question of, so it, with so many determining factors, how do you deal with entering the market and starting your own business? And did you have any fears about all of that, especially as you learned more about the environment? Did you develop any sort of like apprehension or fears about it? And how did you deal with those?
I'm still apprehensive.
30 years on.
I'm just being very honest. I'm still apprehensive and I'm still afraid. You can't de-risk your position in that market unless you sell the company. There's no other way. So you're always at risk in some way in China. We're a small company, right? We're an SME, right? Relatively speaking. But we're very established, we're stable, but we could still be eaten alive by some crazy whim of fate or change or massive social upheaval or something could go wrong in China at any one time. The whole industry can shift against you. So I think the main thing is, how much stamina do you have? And are you resilient enough to overcome every obstacle as it's thrown at you? So I wouldn't say that I'm not apprehensive now or that I'm not fearful now. I would say when I started, I think I was less apprehensive and less fearful than I am now. Not weird. Like, as a point of irony, when I first started, I think I was overconfident. You know that effect, right? You're like, oh, this is going to work. Right? And then a couple of years in, I'm getting slapped in the face every day. I'm like, maybe I wasn't right about this. And, that's when you have deep personal doubts. And I've had that at many stages of this business. I think the first 2 years, many times. I think after 4 or 5 years, another wave of that. COVID, another wave. And now with the economy coming against us in a weird way again. So you're always having these in waves. And I would say because we have a lot more at risk now, I'd say the feelings are greater. So we have more confidence in our future and our ability to grow and succeed and do these things. And we have the confidence, but we also have the humility because we're staring down the barrel of a gun and there are knives falling from the sky when it used to be rain, right? And now you're catching knives. So it's become a new skill. That's why I tell my team, we're catching falling knives. We're getting good at it. So that's the good news, right? You end up building this very thick skin. You are able to get up when you fall down. You can instantly react to changes. You can shift your business overnight. You can completely change your model when you need to, and you're taking some risks. And you have to be comfortable with a constant state of change, risk, assessment, moving quickly, moving out quickly, moving in and out quickly, depending on the situation. Um, it's quite an interesting environment. I don't want to give you the impression that everything's hunky dory. It's not. It's very stressful. Even now, even at our scale, even with our stability and time in the market, it's still a stressful place. Every time we take a brand, there's a huge risk we're going to lose money. Every single time. There's a chance they screw up the labels, which they just did. One of my biggest clients for the fall, my most important season, and we've received the ship. So, stuff like this happens all the time. You just have to deal with it. So that's what I would say is I'm always afraid in some respect, always a little nervous, always a little apprehensive, always slightly annoyed and frustrated and all these things. They're natural feelings. And when you're running a business in China, I think it can be exhausting, and it's also extremely rewarding. Really tests your spine. How strong are you? How tough are you? Are you tough enough? How can you last? Can you outlast everyone else? The process of attrition is really powerful in China. Some people have to quit. They give up, they go bust, they have to exit. They do that. And for them it was a brilliant move. There's, like I said, there's no one right way. Maybe I'm just too dumb.
Not at all. I think I applaud you for being so transparent and so honest with it. I think that's incredible. And also it's great for people that also are on similar paths or aspire to a similar path. It's important that they hear that because, as you said much earlier on, you don't want to sell an image that isn't accurate. And I
Yeah.
think where you're speaking about so many different tests and adversities and constantly having your strength and your commitment to it tested, how do you find that resilience? Where do you get your resilience from to keep going and not quit like other people have?
I'm all in all the time. That's how I see myself. I'm just always all in.
But what an incredible way to be.
Or really stupid because we live on the edge. Myself, I mean, I do. I've got a family. I have teenage kids. My son's going to university next year. I have a girl turning 14. I have a family to support in a not cheap city, Singapore. And you know what that's like. You live in London, I assume, or nearby. It's quite stressful, but that is the only way to be in this industry. I think because I've launched a lot more than one business too. So I failed 3 times in a row. My fourth business was the one I made money. This is my sixth. Sixth. I failed 3 times in a row, had a hit, and then another hit. And then this one just took forever, but now I think it's okay. Well, it remains to be seen. I almost blew this business up too, just so you know. In my late 30s, I was bust. I was living in the States at the time. When I moved to Shanghai, this was right after the financial crisis, a few years in. We financed a business that was actually very successful, but we did it with leveraged debt, which at the time was fine because no one ever called notes. There was no issues with covenants and things like this, and or debt service coverage ratios. I had to learn that term the hard way in 09, 010. So that was tough, and I had to leave with my tail between my legs to take a huge personal loss and really kind of rebuild. That was 10 years ago. So when I started this business, I was in trouble. I mean, I just keep going. That's it. Move on, move forward. I mean, there's no other way. What else are you going to do? Like I said, deep down, I just don't feel like there's a place for me in the workforce that would be a good fit. So for me, it's if I abandoned ship, I'd be back where I am now. I'd have to start another company. That's how I see my life. I know that's wrong, but it's just how I see things. I know it's very weird for people that haven't done it before, like been in launched companies, but we are weird animals, entrepreneurs. We're very strange creatures, and we don't operate normally. You see, like a lot of us do. I mean, some of us are very normal. The vast majority are characters that I've met, at least the ones that launch businesses in Asia. They're characters. They have some very interesting background, very successful, and some of them that fail, they get right back up. I think all of us just have that in us. to just get punched and stand right back up.
I know you refer to it as potentially being stupid, but I personally think it's incredible because I personally don't think I would be able to do it, especially where you speak about previous businesses and your pursuits and how it wouldn't have worked out. To find that inner strength and that inspiration to get up and keep trying and trying the next venture, that is commendable. And I think that's something worth acknowledging. Whether you see it as stupidity, whether you see it as craziness, I think it is amazing. And I think where you speak about the fact that you don't see yourself slotting in to any other sort of business, imagine how many people you've given the space to that work with you that probably feel the same, that they can't envision themselves working in any other organization because you give them the creative freedom to be as weird or as creative, passionate as they want to be. That's phenomenal. So I would like to ask, what are your passions and how have they influenced your career?
I have a range of interests. I love travel and people, passionate about both. I've traveled to, I don't know, 60, 70 countries at this point, a lot. I love languages. In terms of sport, I love tennis, cycling, all this kind of stuff. I used to even play ultimate frisbee. I can juggle, jump rope like a professional, do weird stuff. We all have weird things we do, I guess. How do I spend my time? I think one of the biggest things for me is being a father, which I never thought I'd be any good at. Coming from the house that I did, I really enjoy mentoring and raising children. And I think that extends into how I treat my team and my friends. I try to be someone that's rock solid, that they can lean on and learn from. And I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate about obviously mentoring young entrepreneurs. I'm very active in Entrepreneurs Organization, even though I've been in there for 17 years now. And I'm also in YPO, and we're all about peer-to-peer learning and exchange. And that really excites me a lot. So learning, sharing, travel. I love F&B and hospitality. I have a wine collection, things like this. You develop bad habits in your late 40s. Very expensive habits too. Don't go there. Stop now. Everyone does too. And you develop silly habits. All of those things would be immediately that come to mind.
Yeah,
People,
no,
travel, reading, thinking, strategy, framing, that kind of stuff. And sharing and learning and mentoring. I like all those things.
I love that answer because I think so many elements of that, especially strategy and mentorship, they tie in so perfectly with what you do in running your own business. So I think the reason behind why I asked that was to sort of better understand how it is that your individual self has helped form your professional self. I think that's something a lot of the time people try and differentiate the two, but I think there is always a running thread and there's always going to be a connection between them. But moving on slightly, what I would like to ask you is, so I know you've mentioned a few times now about how the market in China is changing so quickly, but how do you see the market in China transforming over the next 5 years with more global e-commerce brands entering the market?
I don't think the global e-commerce brands entering China is going to have any impact on China at all.
Okay.
The short answer to your question, because number one, if they were worth selling, they're already popular in China, even if they're not there physically. So that's one thing people don't realize. Chinese are super connected globally to everything that's popular and hot and worth buying. Okay. So those e-commerce brands outside China, if they're worth doing in China, they're already in China. Question is whether they're worth launching officially. That's my business. I literally target brands that are ready for that acceleration. So they're already sort of popular, they have traction or potential to explode. We identify them with our data, and then we go and do the business development to bring them on as their distributor in China, if that's what they want. They'll continue to go. So right now, they're all there, whether they're officially there or not. They're there. That's one. Two, I don't think they're going to have any impact on China. I think it's the opposite. I think the e-commerce, or say the brands that are D2C from China, are going to have a massive impact on those brands and other markets. So I would say it's going to be more reverse, because the impact of brands from outside China coming into China has already been there for decades. And it's really accelerated over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years. So I think that's kind of reached its peak. And actually, Chinese consumers are dropping Western brands, right? Their local brands are better, cheaper, faster, higher quality, better customer service, better marketing, better communications, better systems, better technology, everything. So they're building global businesses. So they're trying to hide their Chinese origins. So they're giving themselves like a global name and a global look and taking it abroad. And a lot of people don't even realize these companies are Chinese and they're already there and they're already upending industries. You know, some of the big ones like Shein. I'm sure you know friends who talk about a Shein haul that they brought home, right? And stuff like this. But there are so many. For example, in auto, BYD is disruptive, but NIO is incredibly disruptive. They've basically taken the Apple lifestyle store concept and taken it to a whole different level. It's insane. This brand is world class, and it's coming soon to a theater near you. And I think you're going to find that these brands are world class. They are industry defining. They are far ahead of their foreign peers in technology adoption, in efficiency, in supply chain, in marketing, design, quality, price. I mean, they've got it all. What they don't have, of course, is a bridge to the West, which all the agencies that are any worth anything right now are chasing them for that contract to teach them how to sell abroad. So what I would say is the most likely thing is that Chinese brands are going to have a massive impact abroad, just like Japan evolved and all the Japanese brands have a massive impact abroad. It's China's time for that. So I would say that is the next wave in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of cultural influence. In terms of the future of foreign brands in China, there's always a space in every category for an overseas brand or more, depending on the category. There's always space. And that's what foreigners, I don't think, understand. They think it's completely flooded out or crowded, or there's way too much competition. Let's assume all those things are true, which it is. That's rare that there's no space because the Chinese market is really much bigger than anyone thinks. I mean, the population of Shanghai is more than most European countries, just one city. Guangzhou is like the size of like the economy of Guangdong is 100 million people, and it's like the size of Germany and France combined, just one province. So if you really think about China, it is a massive universe with its own sun, and you are a tiny speck orbiting that universe, not the reverse. They're not a moon around our sun. You're the moon around their sun. That's what people don't realize. This market is huge. It is absolutely enormous. And that's why it's so competitive. What we like to say is it's the land of endless choices and yet very few. Even now, if you walk the streets of Shanghai, it's still easier to buy a pair of Ferragamos or Gucci before you can get shaving cream as a guy. It's literally harder. It's faster to get a massage than groceries. That's why everything's digitized. It's easier to go online. So physical retail was skipped. And it's the places are loud and crowded and difficult to navigate. So there's opportunity everywhere. It depends on what you're looking for. And I think if you're looking at categories, there's endless choices, and yet very few that are worth buying. So that's why there's a huge potential for foreign brands with certain profiles in different categories to come in and take a bit of market share. You're never going to get, 50%. It's China. You're just not going to do that. But even a small share of a category that's growing is a huge amount of money. So a lot of my clients, they're European brands and Australian brands. For them, like even having like 5% or 2% share of a Chinese category is like their biggest market. Like one of my clients, their China business is so big. So we do a huge amount of volume in these two brands. It's one company, but it's two different brands. And just their online sales, I think, is 20% of their global sales in China. And it's a category no one thinks about. And it's one of those niche categories that, they happen to be the global leader or one of the top 3 brands, and they've done so well in China as a result. So I feel like that profile is what all the good partners and people are looking for in China, and consumers are looking for that. They don't just want to buy local. They buy local and they want to buy something foreign. It's not one or the other. It's both. for different reasons at different times in their life. So it really depends on what they're looking for. If you're talking about like infant formula, they'll most likely import that for fear that the stuff in China is fake or poisoned or not as healthy as the stuff coming out of an organic farm in New Zealand, for example. It really depends. And like I said, in most categories, there is a space for foreign brands. Most new categories, there's definitely a space. And even the old ones, with exception to like, you don't want to be selling vitamin C in China, right? Because the Chinese produce like 70% of the global production of ascorbic acid is made in China. So they have a complete monopoly on vitamin C production. So it's very hard to compete. It's too commoditized. But most other categories are not as commoditized, and there's definitely space. Definitely space. And now those brands coming in, I don't think are going to influence the market in the way that you're questioned. I would say it's the reverse. I think people are going to start learning from China, and I think a lot of what's happened in China, because it's in many cases very far ahead of what's happened outside China. East is going to migrate west, not the reverse. I would say UK, in particular, London is pretty advanced in e-commerce and delivery and lifestyle. But let's look at the rest of Europe. It's horrifying. I was in Germany twice this year. I've been in Italy twice this year, or 3 times. I've been in Holland. I've been in Spain, France, and several other places. And I can tell you for sure that the influence is going to be from east to west, not the reverse. Just seeing how far ahead China is in those areas.
Amazing. No, thank you for sharing. That's a very interesting perspective as well. I think you sort of started discussing it in that question, but what advice would you give to people right now who are looking to become entrepreneurs? Not necessarily purely in China, but as a whole, run their own business, be the next Josh.
Oh man. That's a tough thing. I think one of the things I would say to anybody before they launch is to read the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, that book, before you do anything. Okay, just read it and make sure your idea is really new and you're really going to launch a new category or there's real opportunity there. I think one of the things I really screwed up in this current business is trying to take on something way too big, the Chinese market, and not having the positioning correct upfront for the business. The branding and the positioning was off. The original model failed. I should have rebranded and done something that I could with. So I think the most important thing to learn is if you cannot launch a business and own a category, even if it's a small one, win a category, a subcategory, don't do it. Just don't. You're going to struggle. So that's the first thing. If you don't have something, don't do it. Second, you need capital. You really do. The people on the internet that tell you can start a business for zero and make 50 million, this is all lies. That's not my experience. You're either going to capitalize your business to scale at some point, or you're going to starve to death while you reinvest everything in the business for years. Okay. So it does take resources and capital. Your technical skill is almost less important than getting a few things right. The timing is more important than anything. Where and when you do things is a way better indicator of how and what you do. So how and what you do is irrelevant. It's where and when you do it. That's a better question to answer. And then if it's a where and a when question, or when are you doing, where are you doing it? If it's a when, right? It's where and when, then it's a who, in that order. Where, when, who, right? Get those 3 things right. The how and the what comes later. So that's advice number 2. And I know that sounds esoteric, but for the right mind, they're going to understand exactly what I'm saying. And then make sure the thing that you're solving is a big thing. It's a big thing for enough people to build a business, and read a lot of books on startup phase and launching. You know, a lot of people think they have to raise venture capital. Actually, you don't. I haven't done it once, not once. You don't need to do that to build a successful business. It's not necessary. I think most people would be much happier having a $10-20 million business that throws off 10-20% profit and having a good life based on that than trying to build the next unicorn. which is a 1 in a million chance, or 1 in 10,000, or whatever it is. The odds are so far against you. But actually building a successful company, it's not that hard if you get a few things right. And finally, and more important than anything else I said, it's to surround yourself with peers, not people who work for other people, but people like me and my friends who know what they're doing and can share insight that is genuine and valuable for being an entrepreneur at that phase of development. And your associations and being around those people, that support network is critical. So as soon as you qualify, you try to join EO, Entrepreneur, or YPO, or something like this to get the support and the coaching you need. Because I think that that startup phase is very, very painful. Now, if you don't join an organization of your peers, you need to find it through some network of your own, personal or otherwise, and you all have to help each other and become obsessed with making something successful. You have to be absolutely obsessed with it, or it's not going to happen. It's you or it's dead, right? It's all you. When you start out, you're not going to have 500 employees. You're just not. You got to do it all yourself. So it's one of those things. You're either all in or you just don't do it. And you can have many businesses that you own, right? You don't have to launch the next $100 million business. You can launch a $100 million business. There's no one right way to do anything. It's just the thinking is, like I said, where and when and who first, and worry about your how and your what's later. I feel like if you just do that, you're going to win. Make sure your position is defendable. That's something I've learned over the years. If you don't have a defendable position in your market, you're going to be done very quickly. You got to have that, because everyone's going to try to steal what you've done that's successful almost immediately. Doesn't matter where you live. You're going to get competition all over the place, copycats. And like I said, the peer reinforcement and having that feedback loop that helps you get through those early years and those phases are very important. And resources, stamina, all of those things. You got to know yourself. Oh, another book to read, great one, The Dip by Seth Godin. I think it's 60 pages. Extremely valuable, and it's valuable not just for entrepreneurs. It's valuable for people working in a job. It's a very interesting book, and it's about knowing if you're in the right space, if you're doing the right things, or you should quit and do something else. And it's about right sizing your idea with your resources, capabilities, skills. Right? It's a very good exercise.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those. There was a lot of valuable stuff for anyone to take away from that. And I think I'm going to read The Dip as well, just because I'm curious how it looks.
It's a fun, fast read, and it'll change the way you think about your career for sure.
Interesting.
The Immutable Laws of Marketing. One of my friends, he's a super successful entrepreneur who was in Shanghai with me. He exited. He gave this book to me 4 years after I started my company. And I saw in 3 pages the mistake I made immediately.
Wow.
Why I didn't. Yeah. So you got to be around people that know those things, and then they gently share things like, oh, you should check this out. And they do it in a nice way. Hey, have you seen this? This is genius. Check this out. And they're always sending little gold nuggets at you. And if you pay attention, like I was actually going the wrong direction with the business post-COVID. I went on a retreat led by that same guy, and he really spent the time, because he exited, to build this program for entrepreneurs at all stages and get us all in a room. And man, did I learn. Like, he pulled out his playbook for exit, for all this. So we all had to contribute different parts of the course. My expertise in marketing and stuff like that. So I contributed that section. Well, and something else in governance. And then a lot of the other guys contributed branding. That was a tough session to hear, and marketing and positioning. But the worst for me was exit planning and realizing that I couldn't do any of the things that I was about to do when I moved to Singapore. And I saw that, and I literally dropped all of my strategies. This was in December of last year. I literally dropped all of my strategies that I was about to change the company, and I was about to transform the company into something regionally. I dropped it all for a complete focus on China. Based on that one retreat, it was more valuable to me than almost anything. How the buyers see value and where they see value in a business they're going to acquire. That changed everything for me. And I was like, wow, that's really tough to hear. It was so hard to hear his story and then his and all the other guys' view of my business from that standpoint. And I was tough to take. That feedback's hard to hear. Right. And I dumped everything and restructured everything. I literally, the company that is here now is so different from the one 7, 8 months ago. We've changed everything: marketing, positioning, structure, what we're doing, why, all of it in the last 8 months. It's total transformation for the business. And you'll see even more if you follow us, like in the next like 3 or 4 months when more stuff comes out, you'll see it. It's a complete change. It's very different positioning from what we have now. And weird, right? To me, it was the opposite of what I expected. And that's what you learn when you're around the right people. They share stuff and you're like, oh my God. And you can't get this in business school. You just can't. It's not there, right? It's not in those classes. It's in the trenches.
But how
Right?
exciting. Like, it sounds like it's such an exciting journey to be on. Stressful, of course, but it must be so rewarding and so exciting. Well, I have one final question for you. It's very open-ended and it can be whatever you would like it to be, but how do you, as Josh, define success?
I don't know. You know, I don't know what that means, because it's, the version of what I grew up with that's success, what other people consider success.
That's
To
exactly
me,
it.
the
It
word success is about status. It's a status word. So most people, I think, would look at me and say, well, he's successful, depending on where they're from. In my peer groups, I'm the least successful. So to me, I guess success for me would be, because I guess for us, we just don't stop and there's never enough. We don't want more. We're not greedy. We want to do more. We want to have a bigger impact. For me, I guess the stage of success I'd like to be at is probably 2 to 3 years away from now for me. Maybe a little longer, depending on how bad the Chinese economy is going to continue. But I think until my current story is concluded, that would be to me a success if it's a positive conclusion. So the journey I've been on for 10 years, when it comes to its natural conclusion, one way or another, as long as it's a positive outcome, that to me would be a success. I know that sounds very weird and esoteric, but it's how I see things. We're living this stressful life every day and doing these things. And to me, to see this baby continue to get to a level and have a positive conclusion from, like a positive outcome from that, whatever that outcome is, to me is a very successful experience as an entrepreneur. And then personally, I think I'm actually quite happy with some of the decisions I've made personally, family wise, raising children, raising my kids as expats their entire lives, basically living in Asia, having a life less ordinary, so to speak, right? And trying to travel as much as possible and kind of have that freedom, I guess. I've tried to do that personally in my life, even though I can't afford it most of the time. I do it anyway. And that's why I said when I live on the edge, right? Um, I don't know. So I think success is relative. I think it's a status, it's a feeling of status and scale relative to your peers. So currently with my peer group, I'm not that successful. And I guess in general, probably, I don't know, vast majority of people would look and say he's okay, he's done okay. But I'm not really sure how to answer that question, because when I was young, I knew the answer to that question. And then once I had a bunch of failures, I wasn't really sure. Then I had a success, at least back then, what I thought was successful. And then that went against me and failed. And then I had to start over again. And then success in China is very different than success outside China. So being a foreigner in China with a successful company, that's success. So if I'm living in Shanghai, I'm very successful. I'm living in Singapore in my peer group now, I'm not successful. I mean, it's all relative to your peers and who you respect and admire in terms of what their achievements are in life. And as I get older, I think I don't envy anyone else's personal life anymore. Isn't that weird? So I think in that case, I probably am feeling good about those decisions I made personally. And so for lifestyle and child rearing and family and location and opportunity and social life and travel, I think the decisions I've made there, I feel are successful because I don't envy anyone else's, or I don't look up to anyone else's lifestyles being better than mine. Does that make sense? So I guess that would be successful. And then professionally, I'm not where I want to be. So that's going to take time, I think, at
Yeah.
least seems so.
No, thank you for sharing. I know it can be quite an open-ended question, I think. And the reason I enjoy asking it is because for everyone, like you said, it's such a different answer. Some people,
Yeah.
it's the impact they'll make on other people. For other people, it's the fact that that is constantly changing. There are so many different answers, and I think they're all really beautiful in their own way, because everyone walks such a different path. So it's very interesting to hear what your perspective of it is as well. So yes, so thank you for sharing. And that is all of my questions for you today. So thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible speaking with you. And it sounds like you're doing phenomenal things and you're inspiring people, which is why you're also part of our series. And I'm so grateful to you for making the time. And I can't wait to see what you guys do next, especially over the next few months. As you said, there'll be massive
Well,
amounts.
imagine if they get their stuff together and it gets out there, but it could be interesting if it works. We'll see. It'll be interesting one way. It's always interesting. It's China. So we'll see what happens.
Well, it sounds like if anyone can do it, it will definitely be you. So I'm very excited to see, but thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Talk soon and nice to meet you. Good luck with everything.